Hello there.
Hi, welcome back. Welcome to Story Time. And I'm downstairs today for a couple of reasons, but suffice it to say, it's because the shift of the seasons has got me chasing my own tail. I feel like I'm coming from both ends and always moving. So decided to ground in the space where I led grounding practice this morning as a way to offer myself some compassion. It's not that there's a lot of work to reset the camera and the access upstairs, but sometimes we have to let go of that which is just not necessary. So that's the context in which I come to you today. And the content of today's story time is a blending of sorts, but really I wanted to share my story, my experience with holotropic breath work. Now, I'm coming to share holotropic breath work not only because it's mentioned in James Nestor's book called Breath. He teaches that the holotropic breath work was created by a Czech psychiatrist named Stanislav Grof, and that it was intended in the early 1970s, late 1960s to be a legal intervention from a psychotherapist perspective to rewire the brain in replacement of the now illegal use of LSD. Now, we still have folks who are experimenting and exploring in the psychotherapy world in terms of LSD. But what I love is that holotropic breath work eliminates the pharmaceutical consequences, the risks. That doesn't mean it is risk-free. In fact, later in the text, James refers to specifically, he says that heavy breathing techniques like the holotropic breath work can induce hypersurreal and hallucinatory effects. So please hear me out when I say that there are risks involved with messing with the breath because it's the doorway in to the brain and the body. The brain that lives here in the head, and that's what Stanislav Grof's intention was, to rewire, to hijack, to shock, in one sense, shock the system so that the brain could find its way back to a new orientation or a gentler and more easeful alignment. Now, that's what pranayama is all about. That's why we practice controlling the breath, not because we want to permanently stay in that new state, but because sometimes that push, so to speak, that extra effort or that extra compassion helps to meet us where we're at and bring us back to ease. Now, honestly, the first place that I was introduced to the idea of holotropic breath actually came by way of Yoga Journal magazine. And that's what this article is. And ironically enough, as I was spring cleaning files and whatnot in my mental space and in my files, I came across this article, Skye Cowan, C-O-W-A-N-S, and she shares her experience with holotropic breath under the direct guidance of one of my favorite authors and yoga teachers, who is also a licensed or a certified holotropic breath practitioner to guide others. And that is Michael Stone, the author of The Inner Tradition of Yoga. Excellent book. Michael is no longer with us in this human plane as he succumbed to suicide and really a long relationship with fighting depression and mental health challenges. So that is not to say there aren't other holotropic practitioners in the world. And the reason that that's important to work with someone who's skilled, who's certified and licensed to teach the practice is because the practice, it takes us to an edge that is by nature risky, unfamiliar. And at that edge, we can literally lose sense of ourselves. the exact opposite of what Stephen Cope teaches in terms of finding and holding that calm, abiding place so that we can safely tickle the edge without losing our center or our foundation. So there are risks. The story time is not meant to send you off to do this on your own ever, right? Short stints of holotropic breath feel, for me, a lot like Bhastrika breath, the forced inhale, the forced exhale, in and out through the nose for the Bhastrika. But holotropic breath is not unlike hyperventilation. It is in and out through the mouth with an effort, with an aggressiveness. Now, by breathing in and out through the mouth, as James Nestor has shared in his experience, we hijack the natural system of the nasal cavity that hydrates and warms our breath to be more easily received in our lungs, right? So by nature of hijacking that intervention, we're already changing the easeful relationship between the inhale and the exhale, between the breath and the functionings of our entire body. So what does that mean? Well, I thought I would just take you through what I remember. And my memory is not perfect. And it's been probably a decade since I've done the holotropic breath work. I was participating in a 10-day pranayama and meditation immersion training at the Kripalu Institute for Yoga and Ayurveda in Massachusetts. My guide is a internationally renowned teacher. Jonathan Sudhir is his Sanskrit or his ashram name from when he was the president of Kripalu Ashram. So Sudhir Faust, Jonathan Faust, runs and continues to serve in this meditation community. He happens to be married to a therapist. I don't know if she's a psychotherapist or a social work therapist, but Tara Brock is Jonathan Faust's partner in life. Neither here nor there, but Tara is doing great work in this field as well to support our transitions. So Jonathan was my facilitator for this program. But within the program, we had about a 2 to 3 hour workshop dedicated to a front or a first line, our personal experience with holotropic breath. Now, I'm with about 65 other yoga teachers in training, immersing ourselves into this meditation and deeper pranayama practice. But in order to create that calm, abiding space that Stephen Cope advocates for. Now, it's important to know, perhaps, that Stephen Cope is the resident scholar, what a great title, at Kripalu. So his principles and practices are deeply rooted in the Kripalu tradition. And the holotropic breath is being laid into that Kripalu tradition. And so there was some ground rules laid out, as well as some extra support systems put in place for us to engage in a Kripalu way with the holotropic breath practice as a community. Some of those practices were, of course, to discuss what the consequences, what the risks, what the counterindications might be. Meaning, if you are unregulated and you have bipolar disorder, this is not a practice that you would do lightly, right? Even if you're medicated, even if you're in therapy, it's a practice that you want to talk to your care team about. But the same could be true for someone who has unregulated blood pressure, or even regulated blood pressure, because of how deeply this breath practice penetrates the body. In addition to that, then we were given permission to not participate as well. And if you know me, then you already know that that's a big part of yoga as a whole here at Life's Work Yoga, is that the only requirement is that you breathe and everything else is optional. And that includes choosing not to partake some of the offerings that might be offered, right? From there, we were divided up into smaller pods of 5 or 6 practitioners with a singular guide, an individual who is trained to help facilitate these exercises. someone who is deep in the yoga Kripalu tradition and has the additional experience with holotropic breath guidance. By the way, my guide, cutest person in the room, so attractive and cute. I'll come back to why that might be important in a moment. But he had beautiful eyes, beautiful blue eyes, and dark lashes, and a dark tan skin, really chiseled, sings beautifully, plays guitar beautifully, moves beautifully. Had a bit of a crush on him. So we'll come back. The six of us in my pod basically all circled with our heads in the center, and my guide sitting in the center so that he could literally shift and move, having intimate contact with our ears, with our personal space, and equally kind of rotate around throughout the 2-hour guided experience. Furthermore, then we were reclined in as comfortable as a way as possible. For me, it was reminiscent of how I supported myself or support others in the yin practice. Lots of props, even blankets, eye pillows, warmth for coverage. Some people brought in their token items, meaning a stuffed animal or a stone or a crystal or something that helped them feel safe and in nurtured space. From there, we basically began with a rapid inhale and exhale through the mouth. And it doesn't take long for the energy, even the dizziness, the lights and the colors to shift in the prefrontal cortex of my brain. But with the eyes closed and my guide talking soothingly, keep breathing, inhale, exhale, coaching us through every single step of the way. Then it was a matter of things started to shift. Things started to get hot, things started to get dry, right? As I'm breathing in and out through my mouth, itchy and scratchy, pressure building in my head. There was no risk of not getting enough oxygen, and yet there was definitely a transition that James Nestor talks about, and even Skye Cowens talks about this shift in how her brain was functioning. It no longer, for me, and I think that Skye refers to the same thing, it no longer felt linear and progressive. It was at times very circular, almost like a lucid dream, almost like a regular dream. And other times back and forth, like a badly cut horror movie, right? The back and forth shifting. Now, it wasn't always horrific. It was just startling, unexpected, because my linear brain was no longer in control. It was really the more protective brain at first, in which case I can remember strong waves of emotion to the point of crying, real crocodile, big old tears streaming down my face. I can remember my throat clenching and thinking how I wanted to open that Vishuddha chakra to release this emotion. This was just an experience. It was not anything to resist against. And so as I'm coaching myself, my guide, my coach is also affirming, let your body quake, shake it out. Don't be afraid of the movement, because in some times movement was more like a funny bone shift, right? That it was unpredicted. In other times, I would choose to shake, whether it was rocking my knees, shaking my whole body, trying to get rid of what felt like stuck energy or stuck thoughts. Continuing to breathe. At some point, I can remember stopping my breath as if it was my own internal fear saying, stop, this is too much, don't go any farther, this is the edge. And my guide came and he just caressed the sides of my temples, my hair, soothing, and just inviting me to breathe again. There it is. There it is. Breathe in, breathe out. Stay with it. Breathe in, breathe out. And reminding me that I was in a safe place. That was his primary job, was to help keep us steady and calm so that that calm abiding place was familiar, accessible for those who then were able to release even more. So much so, in my circle, there were people that were crying. There were people that were moaning, groaning, even squealing and screaming. Across the room, there was someone who seemed to have transformed into a werewolf, howling at, this is the middle of the day, howling at the moon, and even running, like on hands and feet, like galloping across and around the room. A backup guide came and was with that person while their primary guide stayed with the group. I learned that only after the fact when we debriefed this content and this experience. Someone else, not far from me, had an orgasm and confessed to that in our group processing at the end, that literally felt that peaking towards erotic release and even to the point of ejaculation to some level. Now, that was not my experience, but tears of joy, tears of fear, tears of sorrow, and heat rising from the Kundalini center, in the sense that that energy rising through the spine was a heat, was an uncoiling, was definitely a new depth of sensation, but not completely uncomfortable, not at all familiar and easy, but worthwhile to the point where I was definitely pushed. I was definitely tickled into my own discomfort, and yet affirmed and encouraged and even soothed with gentle love that this too is part of the human experience. And I guess my takeaway today, now about 10 years later, is that I'm more comfortable with not only my own extreme reactions and responses, but I believe that that experience for myself has equipped me to hold space for others in their extreme responses, whether it was a cognitive response or even to the point of knowing when it's beyond my intervention and I can refer people. This is an area that you need to find a therapist. You need to find someone who is specializing in this kind of care. Doesn't mean that you're bad or you're wrong. It just means it's not my skill set. It's not where I can be of service for that someone in their need. But what I can offer, and I believe the holotropic breath work deepened this relationship for me, is that I can offer compassion and an allowing space to say, can you be with this just as it is? What if this wasn't going to change? Could you be with it? And I believe that that is the beauty of all breathing practices and all practices, is it tickles us to experience something more intensely, so that when we come back to what is familiar, we are changed, forever changed, and have a greater capacity to ebb and flow in a broader spectrum of what might be tolerable or normal. The Kripalu flow practice, and by that I'm talking the energy flow, not a vinyasa flow, uses the acronym BRIF-WA, breathe, relax, feel. Watch, I've translated or reinterpreted that to, I interpreted that to witness. So breathe, relax, feel, witness, and allow. Allowing myself and allowing others to not only ask for help and to have breathe as the only requirement, but also to go deeper, to know that this too shall pass. But while I'm here, this is my story, and it has something perhaps to show me, to teach me, to affirm for me. So, cute boy caressing my head, soothing me, someone across the room turning into a werewolf, someone else having what seems like a pleasurable orgasm. All of this is just energy moving through our bodies. But most of us in this modern day have tamped down that attention. And so finding these tickling invitations, these safe spaces to open up that flow of energy is what's going to help us live not only more vibrantly, but more intimately with prana in greater alignment. So check out Michael Stone, check out James Nestor, check out Kripalu, check out Sky Cohen, who I don't know anything about Sky Cohen's other than this article. Tickle the edge in your breath practice for whatever that means, and continue to find a guide to help you go that next step of the journey. so that you remain in a calm, abiding, swaddling place as you rewire your brain, your heart, your expectations, and your relationship with prana. Thanks so much and have a great day. I'm running off to my next appointment. So if you have comments, questions, or thoughts, please message me directly and we'll have a chat. May you breathe deeply and move freely, labor lovingly, and live vibrantly. Namaste.